Hi everyone. I have had just a wonderful couple of days because yesterday was Reformation Sunday and we remembered and celebrated Martin Luther and what it means to be Lutheran Christians. And I am a happy Lutheran Christian. I want to show you, this is a little Martin Luther that I got when I was in Germany. Isn't he cute? He's holding he's holding a little Bible. I think it might be upside down in his hand, and a quill pen that he used to translate with. It's actually very small. And then I have another Martin Luther here, and his wife, Katharina von Bora. They got married eventually after Martin Luther was in the throes of the Protestant Reformation. Yeah, I can be kind of silly sometimes. But here's what I want to talk about today. Sometimes we have very strong beliefs in our religions or in our politics or in our sense of ethics or our families or our ways of life. Sometimes we feel very strongly about some issues. And I'm just like every other person, and clergy are just like everybody else, where we have views about things and opinions about things. But that's not why we can come together and be together and worship together as Christians. We think differently about things, and that's okay. So we can all have our opinions, but we don't have to insist that our opinion is the only correct opinion and that everybody else is just wrong. As I've said before, if you sit at your Thanksgiving table with just your family, there's not going to be any two of you that are identical. And we learn in our own families to get along with one another and to tolerate each other's differences and different ways of looking at things. And that's fine. In Lutheran theology, one thing I really love about it, and again, I don't even mean to be like so strong about being a Lutheran like everybody has to be one, but I happen to like Lutheran theology because Martin Luther said that nothing makes us worthy or good or saves us based on our own good works. He said what makes us whole, what makes us healed, what makes us well is the love of God. We were created in the image of God. We have always been claimed and loved by God. We say this in our baptism. We baptize babies because we say, hey, even before you're conscious enough to say you want to follow Jesus, God has claimed you. You know, that's the direction in which grace goes from God to the person, that you're okay in the eyes of God. And then when we partake in our other sacrament, which is communion, every single Sunday, we say when we meet around the communion table that also signifies the basic equality of all people and the love that God has for absolutely everybody. God invites us all to the table, feeds us all, loves us all. It's not about our works. It's not about being somehow worthy enough to approach the baptismal font or the communion table. And that doesn't just mean works like what we do, like doing enough charity or good works. That also includes our own beliefs and our own theology. We don't earn our salvation by having correct theology. Now, I love theology, and most clergy people happen to be wired that way, where we like to study theology or we wouldn't be in this line of work. So, you know, we can all come across like we're so confident and sure of what we believe in. But the clergy I know, and myself included, we love to have conversations with people who either agree or disagree with us, because we all get to learn and grow and chew on the Bible and talk about God and approach things from different perspectives. The bottom line is none of us has an absolute handle on the entirety of the truth of God. I mean, God is a mind and a heart that is infinitely bigger than ours. And so we're all just doing our best over here trying to figure some things out, but everybody's got to have the humility to realize that we still all have so much to learn. Jesus had this situation in his day where Jesus would encounter a group of Pharisees. Now, at the time, Pharisees were really awesome people because they were the ones who were really focusing on the Torah or the law. The temple had been overrun in ancient Israelite history. It had been overrun by Greeks and Romans who were infiltrating the temple and bringing in their polytheistic, many god religions, and even bringing in some statues of their religions. And so what the Pharisees said was, we're not going to focus as much on the temple and all the rituals and sacrifices that go on in the temple anymore. Now, a group called the Sadducees, they were focusing more on the temple. And then there was a group called the Essenes, and they just got out of town. They went out into the desert and just did their own private thing. escaping the desecration of the temple. But the Pharisees were a really neat group because they said, okay, we're not going to focus on the temple because the temple's really messed up these days with the Romans in our temple. But what we're going to do is we're going to focus on God's law. We're going to focus on the Torah, the written word of God. And we're going to make sure that we're all obeying the law correctly. Now, Jesus was a lot like the Pharisees in many ways because Jesus also focused on the Torah and the law more than he focused on ritual. Like the Essenes in the temple were, the Sadducees in the temple were focusing on ritual. Jesus was more like the Pharisees, focusing on the Torah, the law. He also was not like the Essenes leaving the area and going off into the desert. Jesus stayed among the people. So he was a lot like the Pharisees, but he had a very non-traditional way of observing the Torah. And Jesus usually so calm and supportive. He was a healer. He was a teacher. He loved people, but he lost his cool with the Pharisees. You can see this when you read the Gospels. He told the Pharisees that were so certain of the law, certain of who was right and who was wrong, who was an insider and who was an outsider. Jesus told the Pharisees to knock off that kind of arrogance. So when I start thinking I have the correct theology, I know I have that Pharisee story to keep me in check. I cannot say that I am the be-all and end-all of all theological truth. I can't claim that without realizing that's what the Pharisees said, and that's what Jesus said. Hey, we'll have none of that around here. Jesus was constantly reaching outside of the circle of who the Pharisees said was outside of God's love. Jesus would reach outside that and say, hey, these people are my friends. So whenever I might be tempted to say, or you might be tempted to say, I'm right, and that other group, they're wrong, and they're outside of somehow being okay, Jesus is like, hey, I'm over here with them. And if you can't call them your friends and love your friends, call them your enemies and love your enemies. We're called to gather together in love on this one big planet that we share. We are one human family. And in my church, with my congregation, what I tell folks is, hey, if you think this way or that way, if you vote this way or that way, if you look this way or that way, if you love this way or that way, if you worship this way or that way, if you're totally like me or totally different than me, hey, you're welcome here. And I mean it. You're really welcome here. You're welcome to share with all of us in this community of people where we're not going to be identical. We don't want to be identical. We don't want to walk lockstep with one another as if we're of one mind. Remember that Star Trek show? We don't want to be the Borg. We don't want to be one mind. We want to be disciples, but that's going to look different for every person. So if you're in a certain persuasion of life or politics or faith discovery or whatever, just know that you're welcome. You're welcome to my congregation. You're welcome to my church. We just ask that everybody be kind and respectful toward one another, but there's room. There's room at the table for you. So I hope you know that what we try to do here at Cross and Crown, and what I hope all Christians try to do, is remember to love God with all we've got and love our neighbor as we also love ourselves. Regardless of the labels that we all wear, we're in the same family. So have a great day and be a little playful out there because, sometimes we take life a little too seriously. But remember from Martin, or this Martin, or his Katie, that life's meant to be enjoyed and fun too. God bless you. Bye-bye.